much again to everyone for being here, especially during what is a really crazy time. So I'd like to start by talking about some of the specific challenges of the pandemic, particularly in relation to women. Businesses are obviously in crisis mode at the moment. There's a singular focus on dealing with the pandemic, but this is a male-dominated industry. We can't afford to lose that momentum in terms of progress. So do we think the pandemic is going to affect things like career progression and leadership paths for women, the fight for equal pay, attracting women to the industry? And if so, what, if anything, can be done about this? If anyone wants to kind of jump in first.
So I would like to kick off, if you don't mind. The answer is, unfortunately, yes, it is going to affect. And it is affecting already now. I was just reading some stats about employment in the world, and I was in awe to see that, well, actually, the women are placed in roles which have been impacted the most, like in retail, in services, in domestic care. And all those are being shut down in Spain, specifically, where I'm now locked down. It's been now 11 weeks. It's just tremendous. And on top of that, some of them are able to telework, but they have, as we all know, and probably you've experienced that yourself, we are carrying the most of having to teach children while they're on online classes, and we have to take care of the house because no one is going to come help, and so at the end of the day, unfortunately, yes, not only less women can telework, but the ones who can take the biggest part of the work at home. So that is to be felt. We can later on speak about what can be done, but to your question, Caris, yes, it is impacting, and not very positively.
Yeah, I'd agree with you. I'm seeing a lot of couples sharing the workload as much as they can at home, but at the end of the day, if the schools don't return and the childcare situation doesn't improve, there has to be a decision on the biggest breadwinner, as we call it, going to work and returning to the workplace. And if the schools and childcare isn't there, then it is the women who typically are paid less. We can't hide from the salary imbalances that we still have in the market. It is the women that are staying home or are needing the flexible support to be able to continue. And unfortunately, all the research tells us that does compromise long-term career progression. So we're in a very difficult scenario at the moment. I'd also combine it with the fact that the topic is off the radar completely. If we think about something like sustainability, which has been front and center for most brands and their supply chains in the last 3 to 5 years, that topic has dropped away. So you can imagine something like the female agenda and diversity management is behind that, then we've got a very significant hill to climb over the next few years again to put it back top of the agenda once we're through this scenario.
And I've seen women really struggle if they have health challenges, or I have even some on my team that have parents and even grandparents in care facilities that they can't visit. And that's just tragic. So we're isolated, which we don't like to be isolated. We're very social, most of us, right? And so I try to do lots of video calls, I'm sure like you guys do, but the isolation is just so hard. And then when you can't go visit like your mom, I couldn't imagine. I just have to pray, and I call them directly and just see how they're doing. And, can we send anything? I've taught them, get her an iPad and talk to her every day on the phone, because they can't visit. So just sort of even just family issues can be really, really challenging, I find.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think to answer some of your questions, Caris, specifically about career progression and entry for women in the industry, the entire world is dealing with layoffs and decrease in business. I think it's fair to say that a lot of print service providers and manufacturers, they're not necessarily going to be hiring anytime soon, or they may even be on a hiring freeze. But really, this shouldn't stop us from attracting anyone, specifically women, to our industry. I really think that entry to our industry should come from early education. So for me, we need to work with our high schools once they're back open to show how exciting this print industry is. So many school districts, especially here in the US, they're bringing wide format printers into their schools, and they're printing on-site graphics such as, banners for plays or the high school football team, or even wayfinding signage for new students. So if you bring students into a classroom setting and you're engaging them in something new, giving them hands-on experience and creating a career path for them that they may not know exists, and if the room is filled with young women, that's even better. So I don't think that we should stop this excitement and progression. And once school's back open, that's really, for me, that's the starting point to show women that there's a career path for them in this industry. Mm-hmm. And I will say that Ariel Swedrow, she is a female fashion designer. She's 17 years old. She's in Miami. She digitally prints and screen prints her entire fashion line. She's a great example of a young female in the industry who's given the tools at an after-school program to work with wide format machines, screen printers, and really have a name for herself in this industry. And so if young women can see someone like that excelling, I think it's a great starting point.
Yes.
Yeah, you're definitely hitting the nail on the head in terms of that mentoring and education piece. And it's something that really stimulated the start of Women in Packaging in the UK, because the UK compared to the US is horrific from an education perspective, both for packaging and print. We have no sort of secondary education, college education around this currently. There's various associations and organizations trying to support the sector. But there is no sort of classical education program. And I've told this story many times, and I apologize for repeating it, but we were really excited to see packaging become part of the primary education system in the UK. It had one session included in the curriculum here. And my daughter, who, I worked in modified atmosphere packaging for 4 years, my daughter fully understood the whole supply chain process and the technologies, and she can tell you all about vacuum skin packaging till the cows come home. But anyway, the teacher taught their first lesson on packaging, and the kids, who were 7 years old, sat and painted pizza boxes. And I ended up writing to the school saying, guys, that isn't packaging education. That's actually quite insulting to the industry, and got involved to try and help them. But what it tells you is the complete lack of understanding and appreciation of the opportunities in the industry and the size of the industry. And I look at areas like Michigan State, where they have a fantastic packaging, and Clemson packaging and print program, where the students end up coming to the UK for some experience, but fundamentally they're just extending their knowledge, and we should be shipping our students to the US because you have a great program there compared to here. But without that education program and visibility, as a human being, you only reach for what you can see and kind of look for. And if it's not even visible to you, then how do you shoot for that career? And that example of that designer is perfect, because suddenly they're creating the connection between industry and creativity, and it's suddenly far more attractive to them and viable. Whereas at the moment, the stat we use is the print and packaging industry is the 4th largest employer in the UK today, and it's not even defined as an industry sector by the government. So, you're on a hiding to nothing, and particularly then when you get a situation like COVID-19, you have no voice. You really have no voice, and it's such a shame, because those types of opportunities that you've just described are fantastic, really fantastic.
And specifically because packaging is one of those sectors that have not been affected. Well, obviously, probably, beauty or luxury, fine. But beverages, pizza boxes, that's what we've been eating for 11 weeks here in Spain. And pharma. So it's a booming market. Yeah. And I understand, and I agree with you guys, in the grounds of education is where where the future lies. However, we also need, which we're lacking big time, role models and people up there. Why don't we have more senior women? What I have seen in printing in general, I've seen it less in packaging, but in print, the second or third generation are the granddaughters or daughters, right? And there must be some booming in, I don't know which generation we were more women than men. And then the second or third generation is picking up, and you see how they are really thriving for changing. They are going into the digitization of the companies. They are really going with the times, changing how the companies are working and so on. We need more of those examples. And unfortunately, I've been seeing lately, because of COVID, I've seen in board members, the women are falling down. I can't relate why that is. But I've seen 2 or 3 examples. We need more of that. And I really urge all the companies to, or at least men in power and the few women in power, to foster more the female in leading roles as a role model for the young ladies that just finished their school, to have an aspiration.
But sorry to throw a question in, Karis, but what's your view on mandating female representation at board?
Oh my God, we're home.
I got into a huge argument because I was the first board member of Limpact Group, which was now bought by Klockner Pentaplast, and I got into a conference where I was told that Scandinavia is starting to mandate X percentage of women on boards, and I want to get there on my own volition, on my own capabilities. I don't want to be put there because I'm female. How does everybody else feel about that?
I have such a clear mind now. So, you know what? I have been told so many times, so in Germany, they call them the Quotafrau. Like, you're the woman of the quota. We have a quota, you are the woman of the... And so I have been asked, are you the Quotafrau? To my face. To my face. So I said, no, I hope I'm not. But I don't want any woman out there to feel they are the quota woman. In the very same moment I say that, I know I'm putting half of the female population out there against me. Why? Because they say, because you've made it, because you are one of them. And we need to set quotas to make a point. I give you another point. I'm gonna make now, there are huge companies out there. There is an American company that I have worked for many years in my life, who has never had quotas for Indians, never quotas for Asian management, never quotas for Latin Americans, and never quotas for women. Though women had quotas. You know, surprisingly enough, there are more Black people in management or Indians in management than women, and they don't have any quotas. So quotas are a very artificial way. That is my view, and I know half of the population is against it.
I don't like it either. As I said, I want to get there on my own skills. And does it mean change happens more slowly? Yes, but those individuals who do break through and do drive change, like yourself, will then change the industry for us. And yeah, I'm against it. I don't know how Adrienne and Karis and everybody feels.
Well, I think it's really interesting to, you know, going back to what we were talking about, the education starting earlier. You know, there's no need for quotas if there's a more balanced, you know, gender balanced workforce in an industry. So, you know, there'll be no need to say, you know, we need this X amount of women or anything if we're doing our part early on to attract people into the industry. So I think it's you know, going back to kind of that topic, that's really, really interesting, because when I thought about that question about the pandemic affecting those areas of the industry, it hadn't even, you know, I wasn't even thinking about it in the terms that some of you raised really interesting points on, you know, get them early. Let's actually build a kind of diverse workforce, and then it won't be, oh, there's a crisis, the women issue is on the back burner, because there won't be a women issue, because it's a women are half the workforce in that industry. So I think that's a really interesting perspective on that.
Automatically solves itself.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I have hope. I have an 11 years old kid, and he doesn't understand the men and women thing. Like, he doesn't see men and women. He says people that he likes, people that he hates. And I have faith in the 11-year-old generation right now.
But without getting too deep on it, what's interesting is some of the studies have shown the female psyche changes in the teenage years. I don't know whether you saw, there's a video on YouTube where there's one of the feminine hygiene product brands did a test, and they brought in, they were like 10 and 11-year-old girls, and they said, run, show me how you run. And they run, and they run, and they run, and run, and they sort of, they were acting it out. And they said, run like a girl, and they still ran and did this. And then they brought older girls in at sort of 18 to 30 and said, right, run like a girl. And they all just suddenly did this very feminine sort of camp way of running.
Oh, wow.
And they were showing how society and peer pressure and all of this stuff changes what it means to be feminine. And is that young girl competes head on with your 11-year-old son, doesn't think about being feminine, and she competes head on. But for some reason, during these teenage years, this societal influence starts to happen, and with this femininity card becomes played, and it starts to change our perceptions and ways that we think of being female. And that's holding some women back as they progress into their early work life, because they have sort of predispositions, preconceptions of what it means to be feminine and how they should display themselves. And it's a deep psychological topic, and it's not for a print forum, but it's quite interesting how your 11-year-old boy will be absolutely right, and an 11-year-old girl at that age will be almost gender neutral as you describe it. But as they progress through their teen years, their psyche starts to change, and it does start to hold them back in the case of women, even now. Yeah, even more so now, actually, with social media
shift, you know, as well as in business. Yeah, I agree.
Yeah, it's an interesting one.
Yeah.
Sorry, I talked to you.
No, that's what I want. I want, you know, a kind of open discussion on the topics. But if I can just move things slightly to maybe more onto a personal level, you know, we've talked about how women are kind of being impacted, and if we talk about kind of navigating the crisis, this is something that was definitely touched on by a few of you in the last question. There's additional considerations now. There's hundreds of millions of children home from school, and you know, there's statistics. I know I read one report from the UN about women being disproportionately affected by you know, the burdens of, you know, home care and child care, you know, when compared with men. So maybe we could just have a chat about experiences in this, and how you guys, you know, this is a panel of women, how are you navigating the crisis? I don't know if anyone wants to jump in.
I'll start. Yeah, it's definitely different. I'm used to working from home, but then I'm able to go somewhere or do other things and see people. So, you know, working all day, finding time to exercise, connect with friends and family digitally, complete personal projects, and, you know, like make every single meal is tough. I don't even have kids. I just have a very hungry fiance who is more quarantine hungry, which I say is like bored hungry. So I can't imagine the moms who are making every single meal, not only for themselves, but for their children, for their husband. But for women who are working remotely and also having to kind of add that teacher, you know, a teacher hat to their resume, Sarah Broghammer, she is the COO of Easy Way Signs, and she's also a fellow board member of mine on the Women in Print Alliance. And she just wrote a blog post on working from home with children. So I definitely urge you all and everyone who's listening to this to take a look at that. That's at Printing United Alliance's website, the Women in Print section of the website. There are a few blogs there. And this one, it really just talks about the importance of creating a routine. So not only for yourself, but for your children. And so, you know, whether you're alone or in a full house or working or not, you know, finding ways to have a steady schedule and a routine has really been beneficial to her and some of the research that she quotes there. So I recommend taking a look at that, because it's, I think, a great example of what you can do as a woman during this time.
Great.
I was shocked by one statistic I listened yesterday in the radio. They said, again in Spain, they had received 45% more calls in the psychological support line than before the crisis, and that more than half of those were women, because they just can't cope with that. And interesting for me, it was not surprising, but the surprising part is that the symptomatology that these women are presenting is same as burnout. They are burnout, like if they were giving it all in their career, and that is something that really we should take care of, because burnout, once you've got one, you're very easy to repeat. And that might be now these women, for things, they are having that at home with your support around, with your network around, if this is a good environment. Later on, they will move into the offices and they might carry that further. So I really think people that feel overwhelmed by this situation quite humbly should ask for that psychological help. It's pretty much okay. Personally, listen, I fly every week of my life. I live on a plane. So for me, COVID-19, sorry for saying that, but has been a blessing. I have seen my kid, my man, and my dogs straight for 3 months. And I have been able to sleep in my own bed every night. So at home, we've got our stereotype roles exchanged. My husband is what everybody would call the wife of the house, and I'm outside, right? And he doesn't seem overwhelmed, so I'm good. I'm not asking for psychological help yet. But for me personally, it has been a blessing. I'm hoping for it to finish, because I'm one of a very kind. But for me, it's been great, sorry to say.
It has been a refresh. I'm on the road a lot too, and without having to deal with traveling, being two places at once, booking flights, booking hotels, I feel like I a little bit have my life back in terms of focusing on work and my health and my family and my friends. So I agree with you on that.
It's interesting though, it's just coincided this week, but in the UK it's Mental Health Awareness Week here, so we're getting a lot of posts on social media about mental health awareness, and particularly in the UK it's still a stigma. I'm sure it is in many countries to actually talk about mental health, and it really has increased in importance in funding and awareness and trying to get rid of that stigma here. But I'm with you. I think a lot of people are struggling with isolation. I think it is impacting productivity for those people who are at home. I run a team of 14, and it's like a roller coaster. You can see everybody go up and down at different times. And I'm with you. I haven't traveled now for a while, and I'm enjoying it. But at the same time, you're so used to being on a sort of adrenaline buzz with all those hotels and meals and flights and networking and conferences and client meetings. To come off that, I hit a real low about 2 weeks in, where I kind of felt sick at picking the phone up because you just weren't sure what was coming. So there is a real mental health challenge with this, and I think the longer it goes on, the worse that's going to get, and we are going to have to be, as employers, acutely aware of how to support our staff and be thinking ahead of them. I did a very simple thing this week. I sent sort of hampers to everybody with just some little treat gifts, just to make people smile on a Monday, because you can feel it's Monday, and it's like Groundhog Day. It doesn't really feel like Monday, right? Every day is feeling the same.
Yes.
Which is tough. It's really tough for everybody. But I'm with you. I think women are getting hit the hardest because of that caring role that they tend to take on, even with the house husband that you described. And I live in a family with my parents as well, so we're all in together, and I cope that way. But not easy. It's really not easy for everybody at the moment.
Yeah. Marianne, what about you? How are you kind of navigating
I would say similar to what your experiences are. So very much I would like you guys travel all the time, and I'm really kind of the dad and he's more the mom in a lot of senses. So in that sense, it's been really nice to be home and be with my kids more. And I picked up my daughter from college and drove home, picked up a puppy on the way back. So now my other dog has a friend, which is nice, but it can be loud, especially if Amazon comes and everybody gets excited. So I tried to, I had to do a lot more video meetings. Probably I didn't always do a ton before, but now I do. I like to see my customers, like to see my team. And then, so it just, and then I always start off with, we all know we're going to just have to mute probably because we all have children or whatever's going on. I guess I'm more thinking about, so I'm part owner of my company, but I work with lots of other companies, and I'm real involved in my church and even a shelter here in San Diego. And what I'm kind of watching is, so right now we have this great stimulus package even for unemployment. But when that stops, my concern is there's a whole lot of people who, are going to be really hard to find new jobs, whether it's just in the retail sector, but back in our industry. I know so many people who have furloughed and now laid off, many people. And so, with decent, with very nice salaries and very nice packages. And so I'm sort of watching for them and seeing, how can I help? So probably like you all, I'm a big networker. I would try to connect up people and even customers. I've had some customers who were declared non-essential, and I got them, to work with others who were essential. But yeah, just like you, I'm kind of always listening, and I think sharing any links of helpful information is great. And how to help someone if they are exhibiting burnout, or how is the best way to help them. I think that would be always what I'm always kind of seeking. So, and I just appreciate all your feedback and insights. It's really helpful.
Great. And to kind of carry on that point, Marianne, I know a lot of you made similar points. What are your businesses doing to help you, or what are you doing as the face of your business? What is being done to help you, other employees, and the industry at this time?
So, so Heidelberg has put a lot of measures in place. So first of all, we know most of our customers. So the first customers who shut down were the Chinese ones. And 8 weeks after, it took really 8 weeks. It was like a Swiss clock. And 8 weeks later, they were recovering and coming back, and everything was fine. But then we saw the wave coming all over Europe and afterwards to the US. And what we learned on how to support the Chinese customers, we've applied anywhere else. So having our service team up and running, using and overusing remote services to make them have the machines, those who were working, to have them up and running. And one important thing, tutorials, because sometimes just a service guys come along and explain something. So we started to spread tutorials. That I think it's a practice that many companies have done, and I really think it's useful. And also, I think it will change the way our industry will work. I think digitization has breaking into our industry, whether we like it or not. So one of the very few things of Corona has been the really understanding what all the digital tools can bring in our day-to-day, and we're embracing them all. So I find that's a good thing. And so Heidelberg started using that too. One very important thing, in some European countries, governments are helping small and medium businesses and also big businesses with very low interest loans. And some of our customers didn't know how to apply. So we also made tutorials on how to apply to those helps and to those support programs from the government. And cash is not there as much as it was. So we've relaxed the payment terms with some customers if they really are struggling. And for the first time this month, Heidelberg released the biggest database in the printing industry. It's been the first time that Heidelberg has released it's called the Print Media Climate Report, where you could actually see the averages in your country and compare with other countries and see, okay, benchmark yourself. Am I doing that bad, or am I okay? Because sometimes having a bouncing mirror to compare yourself towards helps also find the strength and say, come, I'm not sucking that much. Come on, we can survive the week or the month or whatever. And I think that was not only a one-timer, like the first time Heidelberg did it, but also a nice, the industry sort of coming together. Okay, this is us, right? And that was a nice tool I found. Yeah.
Oh, that's great.
At Big Picture and Screen Printing magazines, we've created a lot of resources, like you've mentioned, for our audience and the industry. ST Media Group, our parent company, we've created a handful of really U.S.-specific stimulus packages and government acts webinars that are free. They're on our websites now, and we've been doing those the past couple weeks that are really specific to a lot of the bills and a lot of like financial things that a lot of small businesses are having lots of questions about. Screen printing specifically, we launched a weekly newsletter called Screensaver, and it has insight from screen printers and industry experts on how to stay in business during this time. The May issue of Big Picture, we really covered target markets print service providers can enter. So PPE, which is really big, as well as COVID-specific messages. So maybe your local park needs a sign that says stay 6 feet apart, or a local grocery store needs to remind people to wear masks, things like that. So that was in our most recent issue of Big Picture, as well as we covered really how retail is evolving and handling everything during COVID-19. So we've had those resources for our audience. It's the 5th year of Big Picture's Women in Print Awards, and that's really created a strong network of women in the wide format digital print industry. So those women are communicating and checking in with each other. They're helping each other out in terms of different business ideas like the PPE I mentioned, or just simple positive reassurances that we're all in this together and we're all going to get out of it together at some point. So that's been really, really amazing to see. And as I mentioned before, the board that I'm on, Women in Print Alliance, every Tuesday we've created a set of blogs. A different woman in the alliance will write a blog, and we've covered topics such as like tips and tricks from working from home, kind of what we talked about, the specific challenges women are facing in the industry, how to manage your business during a crisis, the importance of continuing networking, like I know we've talked about here. So we've also really been kind of a sounding board and a community specifically for women who have been furloughed or lost their jobs. Mm-hmm. And with the merger of PIA and SGIA to form Printing United Alliance, it just broadens the community of women in the industry. And so it's just a lot more women under our umbrella that we're able to connect and help during this time. Because the more people the more opportunities there are.
That's interesting because I sort of lean towards packaging as well as print. We've sort of had this challenge with women in packaging that the industry has been under pressure. So we've had the opposite problem as opposed to supporting where we see sort of the wide format and sign and display sector struggling. We've got the opposite of everybody's too busy to talk. So we've done things like a blog on top 10 tips for internal video communication. So actually helping them because they worry. I worry, on screen I'm sat there checking, I've got my lockdown hair still with my roots and everything, but making sure that I look okay on screen and is my laptop steady? And we just put some tips and stuff out to help with that. We also put some theoretical stuff out on, you probably all trained in it in 101 school, but kind of this Tuckman's theory, which is the team theory. So this storming, forming, norming phases that we go through when we form teams. Well, that's actually what we've been doing with COVID-19. So I wrote a big article on that to help people understand kind of what was coming and what was going on. But the biggest thing, and this is coming from the sort of employment side, is really getting our heads around, and it's fascinating, we've not touched on it today, but we talk a lot about working from home, but most companies are still very much driven by the office space. And, in a densely populated country like the UK, that's normal. In the US, you do a lot more home working than we do. But enabling employers to get comfortable with the home working philosophy and trusting their employees around productivity, because it isn't about doing a 9 to 5 anymore. It's about being flexible, truly flexible. I have an employee who gets up at 5 in the morning. She starts at 6. She goes off about 10. She has a little 2-year-old with no childcare. She comes in again about 3 when her husband kicks in. She'll work till 7 at night. She does her job perfectly well, but it's strange hours. And it's, as an employer, being okay with that, giving them the flexibility and time. If somebody wants to take a 2-hour lunch but make the time up later in the day, that's absolutely fine. But at the start, interestingly for the youngsters, it's been the most difficult. But we're having to learn as employers to really, really be flexible and be okay with flexibility, not just use it as a, yes, we provide flexible working, which actually means you can do half an hour beginning or end of the day. So yeah, it's been a period of learning for everybody. And I think that's been the exciting part for me is really seeing that educational side of our industry coming together and people taking the time to learn and do things differently as we've progressed, rather than this sort of fast-paced life that we've all been living on planes, trains and automobiles that's suddenly come to a grinding halt. So yeah,
May I ask something to Jo, really? So it's great, right? So like digitization has broken into the industry and flexibility has been imposed almost. Are we going to go back to our bad habits? No?
Well, we're going to go back to our bad habits. They're just not going to be quite as frequent as they were before. So,
okay.
I've got credits with so many airlines for flights that were booked, and I have no intention of using them. I have a client in Norway that in the middle of winter, I would have been trudging through the snow to go and see. Forget that next winter. They're going to be on Zoom with me, having a chat with a nice hot cup of coffee and doing this, because you just didn't offer it before. You got on the plane and it had to be faced, yes, you'll do it once or twice a year as opposed to 6 times a year. The bad habits are going to come back, but I just don't think we're going to accept the pace that we had before. I think it'll be pace, but productivity from home or in your office using this type of technology. And companies that are very traditional that I work with, really kind of out of the 1900s in terms of the way they do business. Wow, they're on Zoom, it's just a big breakthrough for them. So, hey, I don't think that will drop away. Once they realize they're saving some money as well.
There you go.
So if I can, just jump on from that point. One of the things I did want to talk about was a bit more of the kind of the flexible working and remote working environments, and whether that's an opportunity for women in terms of if there is a more flexible environment, there's the opportunity for more equitable distribution of kind of the traditional care responsibilities. So as that becomes more commonplace, could that kind of serve as a boost for women's careers, a more flexible and remote kind of working environment, do we think?
I hope so, really. I've been inspired by 2 of my employees. So both of them are having small children, and both of them are married with women who are working in functions that are considered of high importance, right? Like one is a doctor and the other one is a nurse. And so what they've decided is they have taken a reduction in their hours. And I found it so inspiring, because sometimes we think we have to apply that flexibility to women. We have to apply the flexibility also to men. And only by men like these two, we will have these stereotypes falling down, and we will have this 11 years girl who runs like a boy reaching the 25 running like a boy, right? It's this kind of bias dropping and stereotype dropping that we need to fight for. And not just say, okay, we have to hire more women because they can do these things better, or because a quota or whatever. No, it's because they're as good or as bad. They're just equal.
I think there's 2 challenges, Karis, in your question. I'm absolutely with you. I think that the flexibility has to be for everybody. And interestingly, to that point, I was talking to the CEO of Dow Chemical Europe, so big senior guy. And Dow has been a huge advocate of women in business for many, many years. I worked for them years ago, and they had a women's innovation network then, and they still are only at a 3% penetration of women or 23% penetration of women in their business. And he said to me, Joe, it's not the ladies that need training or educational support. They know how to do it. It's the men that need the training and education support to handle the women and create appropriate environments for women. And that just really resonated for me. It is about all genders getting around this and dealing with it together. The other challenge I would put to you, Karis, is I'm very pro flexibility, and as an employer, employ as many techniques as I can. The challenge comes in that women, particularly in print and packaging, they are present in their industry, there's no question, but what they're present in is administration, sales and marketing, HR, and the creative brand roles. Where they are not is in technical, operational, and leadership. And the challenge with operational and technical roles is often that you need to be on site, shift working, leading in those types of roles that struggle just from the nature of the job to offer the flexibility that we're describing. These aren't home working type roles that we're talking about. Leadership, yeah, leadership is a different thing. I think once you're at sort of the senior management board level, then it becomes a different game, and we're on the flights and hotels time, and that's where the flexibility can play. But our challenge is in the STEM subjects, and it's in the technical operational roles, and that's where a lot of the flexibility is missing because of the nature of the job. So I still think we're going to struggle in that space.
But if the society changes and men feel as responsible, then we can swap the roles, the stereotypical roles that our generation and even baby boomers and generation and even the millennials have these roles in their heads as well. If society changes from that point of view, then everybody needs the same flexibility, not one's more than others. And then you can decide, okay, I am an engineer and I don't want to be home. I want to be in the line, in the production line, and we have an arrangement, a family arrangement. And I think it comes from the families and the society. And like Adrian was saying before, it starts in the education. So the more women we have in technical careers, in engineering, technical, not even superior studies, but professional, technical, that to promote that. I think one of the huge influences that big corporations could do would be to lead, to make technical careers cool for women. Like a girl, that 11 years old girl goes and decides, okay, when she's 16 and needs to decide, is it going to be more technical or less technical? She finds it so cool to be an engineer that there she goes. And then and only then we will. When I'm an engineer, we were less than 10% women when I was an engineer, and now I think they're by 15. Sucks, right? It should be. And on the other hand, I think there, in terms of nurses, it's 99.99% are women and 1% is men. So I think this is part of the bias of the society. I'm not saying we have to be. Now, 50% of the women need to be engineers. No, but certainly more than 15%. Because we can.
Yeah, you only have to look at some of the exhibition stats. If you look at something like Packaging Innovations, it's roughly a 50-50 split in terms of male attendance. But if you go to something like, we have PPMA here in the UK, which is a very print machinery-driven show, 95% male. So you can see the stats even if they're not officially communicated, but we've got to get the women through into those more, as you say, more technical leadership roles if we're going to change the industry. But it's about all the genders working together, not just women like us on a screen or chatting and driving change. We can only do so much. We've all got to work together to deliver the next stage.
Yeah, we have to remember that we do have allies who are men who are willing to help us and be part of this on an equal level.
Absolutely.
For the Women in Print Awards, at the beginning we were told that there wouldn't be enough women to win. There wouldn't be enough women to continue this on. We're in our 5th year. The amount of nominations we get for women leaders in the wide format industry is astonishing. I mean, it's not astonishing, but to start with that comment that we wouldn't be able to continue this award with 6 winners each year, there are women in this industry. We just need to continue doing things like this to show that there's a community there, and which will only bring in more of a generation to be part of this. But we have to remember that we do have allies in this as well. And we've all kind of mentioned some, or have had, men mentors or men who are CEOs of major manufacturers or other print shops who are totally on board with this. So we just have to remind ourselves that we don't have to do this alone.
No, I totally agree. And some of the senior leaders, male leaders that have stepped up for women in packaging sponsorship to help us, it's fantastic. I don't think there isn't an appetite for change. I just don't think it's front of mind as we sort of going full circle on the discussion today. It's just kind of an accepted norm. And that's what we're saying is it can't be the accepted norm going forward, particularly when you see scenarios like this. But totally agree with you. I think there's some fantastic individuals out there that are really rallying for change. Agree.
Yeah, absolutely. And, we're coming towards the end of a time. I don't know if anyone else has anything to share kind of on that topic of maybe the opportunities that this might bring to kind of end on a positive note. If anyone has
I would say that I encourage lots of internships. So while I don't actually personally print much of anything, my customers certainly all do. And so, offer more internships, to girls as well and women, and, let them come in and see, and run everything. Like I tell my daughter, try everything, try every job. I had tons of jobs. I was bartender. I did boy jobs. I did all kinds of jobs. And so I think, also I always encourage them to do lots of sports, but also I use lots of social media and even just like with WhatsApp or, Slack. And so I keep in touch with all of my teams. And so what's nice there is the whole company also has, because everyone is remote now, has the nice communication abilities. So, so people used to say, because I've always had my phone with me, and some people didn't always like that, but to me, it was my freedom. I mean, I was on a vacation, on a beach somewhere, and I took a conference call, and someone's like, "Oh my gosh, I'm so sorry." I'm like, "I'm on a beach." Let's just back it up a little. So I think being flexible and then really teaching kids and everyone to really be curious and, ask lots of questions and just be open to try everything. And so I think I do that with all kinds of people. Even now we're going to have to, I think, reintroduce, again, people who've lost their jobs. Maybe there's another job that doesn't fit your exact title, but, you might really find excitement and enjoyment and, new things to learn.
And just to touch on having an internship, mentorship is also really important for us. I urge all of us to not only have a mentor, but mentor someone and have a mentee. And I found that really helps within the industry and then in your own personal professional goals.